Did the King County Democrats violate the law again? Well, watch and tell me what you think. Thank you for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Governed. Once again, I start out this video, as I've had to now for a while, with a quick trigger warning to anybody who's watching, just to let you know that nothing I'm going to say here has been approved by Governor Inslee's Ministry of COVID Compliance. And although I don't plan to discuss COVID today in this video, I just want to reference that if you only want to hear what the mainstream media wants you to hear, and certainly what Governor Inslee and his party want you to hear, you better stop watching right now, because you're going to see some unapproved content moving forward. And really, I'm coming back from a big snowstorm that we recently had here in Western Washington, and I know for those of you who are watching outside the state or somewhere else where snow is much more common, the mild climate on the west side of Washington, we usually don't get this much snow, and so I was snowed in. This is what it kind of looked like outside my house, as I was forced to also jump out there and try to help save some of our Icelandic chickens. They do quite well in this weather, but you still have to do a lot of maintenance when their water's freezing. And of course, being snowed in, I didn't have a lot to do right there at the house, so I decided to go back and start looking at the Public Disclosure Commission filings and going back and looking to see who exactly has been complying with Washington State's laws and who has not been. And so I filed quite a few different complaints while I was snowed in, and one of them had to do with the King County Democrats. And the question here is, did they violate the law with the campaign finance laws once again with some of their historic filings? And I bring up that question because there was an interesting meeting that they recently had. When I say recently, it was a couple years ago, but it kind of sets the tone for some of my concerns here. And this meeting really came about in February 26, 2019. These meetings are relatively boring, and there was a video helpfully posted on Facebook Live, and there was a treasurer's report that was made about an hour and 32 minutes into that video. And one of the things they also do is they open up public comment, which is good, that people can come up and ask questions about the documents that have been handed out. And one of these people came up and asked a question and legitimately had some reasonable questions about what she saw on that video. And I'd encourage you to go and watch the whole video, but I'm going to play just a little segment of it here to set the tone of what this question really was.
That have since it's finished.
Okay.
That work was done simply so that we could get up and running, because there wasn't much handed over.
Okay, but technically we didn't pay, somebody else paid that money.
That's correct. That donor would like to be anonymous, so I'm respecting that until that person would like to come forward.
That makes me so uncomfortable that we're doing things like this. Like, we just kicked out our last chair for doing shady stuff, and that feels very shady.
Okay.
So I feel very uncomfortable with that.
So when you actually look at what she's talking about here, we're really talking about some violations of the law, and she's concerned because at that time the King County Democrats had very little money, and there were a lot of other problems, and she's also concerned about other violations that I did reference in a complaint that I filed about this issue, with basically willfully concealing the identity of in-kind contributors. There was a comment made, the actual person who did give this in-kind money got up and talked, referencing a corporation, her company, that she ran this money through, which has never been referenced in any of the PDC filings, for example. And there's some personal penalties that can be assigned to both the treasurer who attempts to conceal it, as you see here in this statute, 751G. There's a financial penalty equivalent to the money that they've concealed. In this case, it sounds like $3,300, assuming that this is even correct, because we don't know if it is. And there's some other problems that are related to that. So it's pretty reasonable for somebody to come up and ask a question. I mean, that's not, normally that would be a fairly normal behavior, and you'd want to address the question. Now, just because they violate Washington State's campaign finance laws, anybody that's followed my work knows that I've caught hundreds of people breaking the law in Washington State. It doesn't mean they're having jail time. It's not the end of the world, but it could be a fairly significant monetary penalty if it looks like they're actually violating the law and attempting to conceal the true source of funds, which appears to be a corporation run by this anonymous donor who was identified in some documents, and so we're not really clear what's going on. But because of the history that the King County Democrats have, breaking the law, that has been a common thing here for this particular political group. And there's no way that that can be denied or concealed from the public. There's a lot of history on this. And it goes back, this is kind of the image that the King County Democrats want you to have of their organization, just running in gay pride parades. This is kind of their image that they want to portray to everybody else. However, when you go back and you look, and especially from 2016 forward, there was a Seattle Weekly article here that detailed this, and I wrote about it as well, about the Democrat treasurer for the King County party at the middle of the night driving down and dropping off a box of documents, financial documents at the door of the Public Disclosure Commission. And when staff came in the morning, they thought it was a bomb, or they had the bomb squad from Olympia come out and check it out. It was all kinds of drama. And the PDC was not happy. The Public Disclosure Commission staff, they were not happy with it at the time. They even filed a minor complaint against the King County Democrats for all the drama it created at their place. And ultimately, in around that same time, Bailey Stober, pictured here, was running for the King County chair. And his platform was talking about all the late reports and violations that the King County Democrats had with the Public Disclosure Commission. And so he was trying to confront that, and that using it as a platform, saying, hey, I'm going to clean this up. And that was why he was running for office. And that also led to several complaints that I filed with the campaign about the campaign finance violations, which were really significant. There was really an endless series of problems there, which actually led to multiple litigations by the by Washington State's Attorney General. And these were caused largely because I had filed citizen action notices. The laws have been changed since then. You can't quite do that anymore. But at the time, it forced the AG, the Attorney General, to file a lawsuit specifically against Bailey Stober, and he had to settle in court for about another $6,000. A previous penalty against him was also renewed, where some funding, some part of the fine had been deferred. Ultimately, it was about a $10,000 expense for him personally. It also resulted in some fairly large litigation being applied against the King County Democrats themselves. So the Attorney General had to go after them based on some of these complaints that I filed. And of course, it made the papers even at the time. This is back when the papers would report on some of this stuff. And it also then led to further drama where the King County Democrats decided to go after Bailey Stober, who was their chair. And there's always factions in local parties. I actually think Bailey Stober was a reasonable chair. I mean, sure, he had financial problems there, but so does everybody who runs the King County Democrats. So there wasn't anything terribly new about that. But there was just a bunch of drama. There was a 13-hour marathon session as they got rid of him, forced him to resign, I should say, from the King County Democrats, as well as forced him to settle and resign from his job that he had with the King County Assessor's Office, which was much more dramatic. But there was all kinds of turmoil, trying to make it sound like there were some sexual harassment charges. When you look back on this investigation, I think a lot of it was overblown, but there were two factions warring with each other, and one faction that prevailed, had several reporters locally on their side, and so they were able to really make quite an impact with this. And ultimately, he decided to resign. Seattle Times even covered the story. There was quite a bit of drama, and there was a lot of concern raised by local Democrats at that time in various articles written by quite a few different people about losing their way. And even The Stranger in their slog wrote about the King County Democrats when Bailey Stober resigned from the assessor's office and the severance package that he got there. And keep in mind, a lot of these positions in King County government are oftentimes given to political people who are tied into political campaigns. And so this was a $98,000 job that Bailey Stober had. It was a pretty good job for him. And to have that be part of what they did is getting him to be removed from that position, as well as being removed from the King County Democrat chair. That was a lot of drama in the middle of an AG lawsuit that had been initiated by some complaints that I filed. So a lot of drama going through 2017, 2018. But a lot of that drama wouldn't have been there if they just complied with the law. And all these violations that attempt to conceal a lot of money, hide it from the public, and just disastrous sort of decisions that have been made really led to some of this drama, which ultimately resulted in a $36,000 judgment against the King County Democrats for breaking the law. And the Attorney General had actually gave them, based on some other complaints I'd filed against other Democrat groups, the Attorney General started to create payment plans for a lot of these Democrat organizations. And so they were allowed to do payment plans rather than do the settlements all at once, which up until then had been the previous way that the AG had treated these cases. And so the final payment was just made in July of 2021, left over from those complaints that I had filed back in 2017. So this drama was continuing right up through and right in the middle of that public meeting where they're discussing it. So you can understand the concern of some of the PCOs and some of the people who are in the King County Democrats raising questions like this, because when you look at the stipulation and judgment that the AG has, and I've linked all this stuff down below. There's a ton of articles, so I've got a lot linked down below if you want to read more. But there's a $12,000 penalty that was deferred, and it's hanging over their heads if they break the law again. So it really is important for them, at least if you care, if you're at the King County Democrats and you don't want to waste all your money, you really are going to try to cross your T's and dot your I's. You aren't going to take any chances in your filings. And that discussion that they had in that 2019 video and the bizarre effort, this company that's not being reported, C4s, or C3s, I should say, financial documents that may not be disclosing the true nature or source of some of this money, that's a problem. That's a potentially serious violation. Now, the question, of course, then, is what happens to the poor gal that got up and actually raised these questions? Well, of course, she was brought up on disciplinary charges, code of conduct, because people said that she forced the donor, the anonymous donor, to come forward and out herself, which was kind of odd because you don't really have a choice. You do have to be disclosed. As the King County Democrats admitted in this code of conduct charge investigation of this person, that that somehow by raising the question here and forcing her to out herself, which is a legal requirement anyway, that somehow that she's doing something bad. So, of course, I've been a critic of the King County Democrats for many years and obviously exposed quite a bit of their wrongdoing over the last few years. And, of course, the concern here is that rather than helping restore the future of the American dream, they're actually helping destroy it more often than not, certainly with the people that they support getting into office. But the question is, are they even bothering to follow the law themselves? Very well may be that they get a pass this time. They oftentimes do. Many of these groups do, but it never hurts to point out and raise the question and see what's actually going on and what's being concealed from the public. And hopefully the Public Disclosure Commission will do that. If it's not this time, maybe it's next time. It does seem to be a pattern of behavior, and based on my past experience with this organization, it's not going to be the last time they break the law either. So if you want to learn more about this and just the history that I've discussed here, there are a ton of documents and links that I have down below. Feel free to look at any of them. There's a lot of source documents linked up there. And you can also go to the PDC website and look up some of that history and read about a bunch of the other articles that are related to kind of the sordid history of the King County Democrats. So I just want to point that out because the truth is, if you want to be active and engaged, you do have to pay attention to what's going on. And as this PCO who was at the Democrat Party meeting did, she's paying attention, asking questions, and I'd encourage activists, I don't care what party you're in, to raise similar questions in the organizations that you're involved in, making sure that they're trying to comply with the law and pay attention to what's happening. So you can't get anywhere, you can't change anything unless you're willing to pay attention and show up. Showing up is a big part of the game, and as I always say, the future belongs to those who show up.